In this video, I'll be taking you through how we in geography use a land use map to collect data, why we would use a land use map, points to consider, and how this applies to the Cambridge IGCSE Geography exam paper 4. So the purpose of this video really is that when you have a past question out in front of you and you are working through it, and the question asks you about land use maps or about how you can show change through time, or you can investigate the CPD, then you can use this video to help you write a good answer for how to collect land use data, why you would do it, and other points to consider. So it really contains general points, and it also emphasizes the role for you to practice. So why the method only? For human investigations, so one question that comes up on paper 4, it is always focused with human investigation, because there are so many different types of human investigations that can dip into so many different themes. It's the method that's the most important. Methods, why you use a method, the common issues with that method, things to consider, is what makes this part of the paper unique. This is the unique content you have to know, because everything else of this paper dips into either theme, paper 1, paper 2, or is a skill, and it's just to practice and use that skill and answer questions in a certain way. So it really emphasizes the role of practicing past questions. So let's kick off. What is a land use survey? Land use survey shows how different areas of an urban area or land are used. So you can see here that on the right hand side, this is actually farmland, and you can show all the different colors represent a unique way that this land is being used for farming. Each color is a different crop. So it enables us to understand how land is used for different purposes, such as residential, commercial, industrial, public facilities. And so it helps decision makers to understand how it's currently being used and plan for future developments, crops, accordingly. And therefore, when you get the summary of results, so once you've categorized all the land like this, then what we would do for an area, we would often give those overall view as percentages on various graphs. So you might see this dipping in from land use models. So if you know all about this, please move on to the next chapter, which you can scroll through in the bar. If not, please stay and listen. So land use models are very common when it comes to looking at how a city is being used. And so it's wise to know what the various key land uses are in each particular area. How can we distinguish them? And so what they look like, all that various bits and bobs. So it's very helpful when it comes to that. You might be asked questions to explain why it changes through time. And so these are the various things that you want to consider and how these influence land use change, particularly within urban areas. Farming tends to be due to climate, fertile soil, etc. Other things to consider when it comes to land use maps and how it changes through time is the assessment hierarchy. So you should have seen something like this. So these are typically areas we find in rural areas and urban areas, and you should know that really as you go up the hierarchy, the size of the population, number and range of services increases, but the actual number of capital cities decreases. So there's only one capital city for a country, but there are many isolated homes. And also it's important to know the difference between high order services that you can see on the left and high order goods that you can see on the right. So a service is something that we can use to help us. A good is something that we physically buy. So you can see here all the various different examples here and the definitions. And that's really important when it comes to land use surveys. And so if you want to generally categorize them, we know that low order service or good generally has a low cost, whereas a high order has a high cost. We know that the quality also increases, and we know that we often use a low order service but rarely use a high order service, or we rarely buy or go out to get a high order good. And here is an excellent diagram I took from Save My Exams that really sums up other things that you might be asked to consider. How would you go about investigating city sphere of influence, the town sphere of influence, a village sphere of influence, and land use change could be useful for that, to look at key land uses in different towns. And also there's some good definitions here for you to be aware of. These are all questions taken from paper 4 that applies this theory. So here you are asked to categorize a high order service, middle order service, a low order service. Well, Bus stop, use all the time. Airport, rarely used, so a fire station has to go in the middle. And what do you mean by low order service? Here we go, a service which is frequently used. Other definitions, what do you mean by the rural-urban fringe? And for example, you need to categorize these land use types, these types of land use from an overall categories. And this is a very common way of doing a land use survey as well. So concert venue, although not written, you need to think about it. It's entertainment, and apartments, residential, and a library is a public building. So again, you need to be a little bit common sense for some of these questions too. So you can see here another common question, describe and explain the shape of the original village built before 1960. So again, a little bit looking at the key. Again, this diagram has been taken from Save My Exams, but it's really useful here because we can say quite clearly the original village was linear in shape as buildings were built along the river and old village road, because I'm looking at these X's and where they've been found. The next question asks me to describe how the village has changed since 1960. So again, this is when land use type becomes really important because I can see how it's expanded, and it's definitely expanded in size between the old road and the bypass. Most expansion occurs between 1960 and 1985 because that land use type is the most. Another nice common question that's also been pushed on from this, look at a different type of land use. I need to try and work out where it's been found. These buildings look old, so I'm going to assume, but also they're very close together, built along quite a small road. So that's why I think it's location 3. This is a practice question for you to have a go at. You can see again how these questions could be asked, and it's really important that you can use this to explore, how if a question that asks us where services can be found, well then you use a land use map. So have a go, and pause the video, give it a go, and I'll give you the answers now. So how would you go about carrying out a land use survey? So obviously we start off with hypotheses, and so if you have a little read here, these are taken from a variety of papers. It's how it changes throughout transect or through time. The main type of land use in an area or change across an area. How can we know? How does it change? How can it varies? How can we use that? Okay. So how do we collect data? Well, on the right-hand side, I took this from the Field Studies Council. This is an excellent key, very detailed key of how you go about doing it. So generally, you choose the study area and the sites. If you're going to sort of visit a large study area, you're going to have to use sites. If not, you can do the whole thing. You would typically draw a sketch map of the study area. You create a coding system, like you can see on the right-hand side, and you record generally the ground floor use only. You would go around observing and recording the ground floor use. So for example, if you find a building and you think it's residential and flats, you would put R and F. And then once you've done that, you might take photographs or sketches, and then you would analyze the data you've collected. This is another example here of how they've gone about doing it. And this is, again, what it could look like when you have finished. So you can see here, nice little sketch map has been drawn. Each building's been marked on with the various type. And what you could do, because it's shops, services, and other buildings, you might then color codes. V, for example, green, R, green. You could do any shop, you could color code red, and then services blue. It's entirely up to you. So again, before I move on to the actual method itself, why we would do a pilot study before. So again, you've seen this question appear in many of my videos, but it's really useful when it comes to this because familiarize yourself with the methods. For land use survey, it could also be because you just get used to categorizing land and you can decide. Risks to consider as well, to think about how any of these can influence you collecting land use data. Remember, you are outside. You're going to do it during the day. You are going to walk on the pavements. If it's cold, you put on a coat, all those type of factors. So here are the questions that could be asked, and these are taken through time. Some students wanted to do a fieldwork about shops and services found in a village, how you go about doing it. Some students wanted to delimit the CBD, so how would you go about doing it? And so what I've done is written 2 similar answers, okay, because for one, you've got the village, so it's important therefore that you draw a sketch map. For another one, you would assume the CPD has been done, so you could just get that from Google Maps. So here, and it's only 3 marks, so pretty much you can go straight in. But it just shows you, again, what you need to do. It's really important you talk about the key. You might carry out a pilot survey, so you get used to it. And then, but what's important, that you would walk around the village, you would walk around the town centre, classifying the ground floor of each building, and then you would go about, then once you've done that, then you would count the number of different types. In this question, it talks about how you do it through time. So I've given you a model answer to the various things to consider. And what I've done is I've lifted the key bits of information from the question and I've incorporated that into my answer. So if you want, pause the video and make some notes based on what you've just seen. So again, it might ask you to do advantages and disadvantages of particular sampling methods, to do record the land use here. So this one, they've done systematic sampling because it's each particular site. And so these are the things to consider. Why that's particularly useful, because you can easily see changes along the transect if you're doing it every 100 meters. And it's an easy method for all students to follow. But the problem is that if you're only doing ground floor, land use on upper floor could be different. And as well, land uses on one side of the street may be different to the other. So that's also something to consider. If you're only focusing on one side, you might miss another key that actually dominates the land use in that particular area. So what sort of data presentation questions could come up? Well, really, I've got another video, which I'll link back to in a minute, but really with these, it's just practice. This is something that you just have to learn through practice. So typical methods that I've seen are pie charts, bar graphs, some sort of tally, and also you doing some calculations. Now I do mention scatter graphs, but that's standard technique, but these are the main ones that you would use to measure, to show land use change through time or in a particular area. A bar graph would typically be used to show it through time, whereas a pie chart would be kind of used to be doing it in that particular moment. So again, I made another video which you can see, which you can go onto my channel to find out, and that talks about a wide range of data presentation techniques that can be used throughout all of the papers. So tally, how would that work? Well, in this question here, I've got the insert on the right hand side, and what I would simply do for the first one, you can see residential here, I would cross off any that's been done so I can focus on what's being left. So I would almost do a tally myself. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And again, I would then do that in. I would then do entertainment, so that's 3. Public buildings, which is 2. Open space, 2. No transport, and then 2 services that are left. And so you can see there, you've got the answers correct. Another one that you can see here, again, you can see that nice use of the bar graph through time. Distance from the city centre in table 2. What is that? Which is the distance? Okay, so again, I would go through to work out what table 2.1 is found in. So again, right, all 65, that's a couple of locations. Again, narrowing it down here, so I'm using my ruler to go up through until I've eventually found the one that fits. And so again, it's 801 to 1000. Using the colors, using the times, using my ruler, which is being shown by the red line. And then again here for the second question, I'm going to find total land use from the city centre at that particular time. So I'll get my ruler, work it out there, and I can put it down as a nice 80%. So again, you can see here which service is present in the highest number of settlements. General food store, and then I would need to do the total number of different services found. So that's simply counting the ticks, and then working out here, I'm almost doing a settlement hierarchy. So I'm having to put the total number of different services in order. And so I would go down the list, going H, D, G, A. And then, yeah, all of the answers are correct. So again, something I take very methodically, very logically to make sure I've got these relatively straightforward questions correct. Because remember, across the whole paper, this is about 12 marks. So 20% of your paper is based purely on these type of straightforward questions. Not mentioned, but again, scatter graph, so it's just important to remember to work out the scale. The y-axis here is 5 small squares equals 1 service. X-axis, 1 small square is 200 people. So I'm going to start off putting the point there, copying exactly what's been done. I've done this in red because it easily shows to get my mark. Okay, here you need to go about shading in two different land use types. So it's important to work out if it's a good or service and if it's high or low orders. And then once you've worked that out, you copy the pattern exactly. So for a hairdresser, it's a service, it's something that you buy to have done to you and to help you. So again, I would say that's low order. And a furniture shop is then high order. So I would then shade in the area. I haven't got the ability to do X's, so I've just done dots, but please make sure you do. And for the furniture shop, it is the straight lines. And so next one, again here, very common question for you to draw pie charts. So what I've done here is zoomed into the area. And so I know that the first three have been done for me. So we go to 40. They've arrived at 40 because 21, 14, and 5 equal 30. 40, sorry. So are the units data or percentages? So if group C ends at 40%, all I need to do is add on 28% to get to 68%, draw that on, copying the pattern. So remember, I can't do X's, so you would have to do that. And then I would do the final bit. So then I need to go about saying if these hypotheses have been proven true or false. To do that, you need to look at the data, and the first thing you write, as the mark scheme tells you, is that it is, if it hasn't already been said, you need to tell me if it's true or false. It's already been told me that the area was true, so I do not need to write that, but I do need to provide evidence to tell me why that is true. So you just pick out the obvious data to show why they think that statement is true, and you can see my answer written there. And when it's not been given, I need to tell me if that has been proven true or false. The first thing you always write in these questions is if your hypothesis is true, partially true or false, and evidence to say why. Always need to do that if it doesn't say otherwise. Thank you for watching. If you found this video useful, please do like and subscribe. And if you think it'll be useful for your friends, do share it with them. But remember, always refer to these videos when you have a past paper out in front of you. Thank you for watching.